Have you missed it? Like, do you guys think, I should have got in on Bitcoin?
I don't spend long
5 years
thinking
ago.
about it.
Bitcoin.
And Bitcoin is something that certainly a lot of people think, is going to rise as an alternative currency.
The Australian Bitcoin Podcast, presented by Hardblock.
It's not a currency, it's not money. I don't understand it.
Yo, welcome to another episode of the Australian Bitcoin Podcast, episode 98. Off the back of the wankerish price action of the last 2 weeks, episode 97. We're back on deck after one of Bitcoin's biggest meltdowns in history, which was fitting that we called episode 97 wankerish price action. We're on the hunt still for Green Uptober, and we're here with my legendary co-host, Magic Mike. How you going, mate?
Good, mate. How you going?
Very good. And we're joined with a very special guest joining us all the way from Africa. I'm presuming South Africa, Dale, but a very special part of the world nonetheless. Mr. Dale Warburton. G'day, Dale. How you going, mate?
Yeah, great. Thanks, man. Absolutely in South Africa, in Cape Town at the minute, and pumped to be with you boys.
Is that your OG home turf? Is that where you're originally from?
Yes, Mike. Indeed, this is my old haunt. This is where I used to run the streets. I was a little Cape Town gangster running about, chasing tail, and brings back a lot of memories. But it takes a few days for the eyes to adjust because it can be a bit chaotic. So, yeah, but it's beautiful.
Great.
Excellent. We're recording on the 23rd of October. Block height is 920,344. Current price of Bitcoin is in US dollar dues 108,407, or Aussie dollar dues a little bit more expensive, 167,316. Probably the most important stat is the exahash, and the hash rate is 1,066. So we're staying steady above that zeta hash, which is good to see. There's been a bit going on in the last couple of weeks since we recorded episode 97. Red Uptober, the hunt for Red Uptober. That's what I'm titling this episode. Bitcoin started October pretty strong, in opening around 118,000, and then we smashed up to all-time highs, 126. However, Mr. President Donald Trump, who was posting on Truth Social on October 10, vowing massive 100% to 130% tariffs on Chinese imports, basically triggered off an incredible dump in the markets across all markets. And it was funny, Bitcoin dropped 10 to 12% in like literal hours. And I just saw that the price was down, and I wasn't actually aware that it was one of the biggest dumps we've ever seen. And, from my perspective, I was just like, oh, okay, Bitcoin's cheap again. That's cool. But apparently it was like a massive liquidation. Talk to me, Mike. What do you think?
Yeah, so it's a lot of pain for people, especially if you're into that leverage trading, especially in the shitcoin space. A lot of people wiped out by that massive flash crash 2 weeks ago. So I reckon that would have been a few days after we recorded our last episode. It just got trashed the next day off the back of that Trump announcement. Everyone panicked, and people saying, "Oh, it's doom and gloom. This is what can happen in crypto." But it's also quite a bullish case for, it is the only market that was trading on, over that weekend. Everything else shuts down. So, the fact that you still do have a market that you can go to, leverage off this news, and still actively trade on a weekend, still is like, it shows the strength of the fact that we've got this 24/7 market available. And yeah, it was a lot of pain if you were in the altcoin space specifically. Bitcoin obviously took a hit, but it's still trucking along. We're kind of just back to where we were a month ago, really, if you just zoom out a little bit. So yeah, we'll see if in history, October usually looks very good. October, that sort of thing. Yet to be the case, really, now that we had this bit of a flash crash. So we'll see if we can salvage it in the last week of the month.
Dale, do you know anything, or maybe Mike does, with regards to? There was something that I heard, and I'm just saying this live off the top of my head, but the Trump boys, his sons, were apparently playing some silly buggers. Maybe they had some inside information, and they made quite a little bit of coin off the back of this arbitrage. Is this true? Does anyone know?
What do you reckon, Dale?
I think that Trump is doing what every other president has done, is front run a lot of the Wall Street action, except he's a little bit more blatant, I think. So, yes, I have seen some information along those lines. And just to sort of touch on what Mike was saying with regards to that leverage kind of blowout, from what I saw, I was sitting in the middle of the bush at the time. And from what I saw, it was 10 times larger than the leverage collapse in 2021. So we're just talking about a liquidation cascade multiple times bigger than what we've previously seen. And yet Bitcoin didn't get absolutely annihilated. Some shit coins were down as much as 99%, probably closer to the intrinsic value of zero. But yeah, it's been a tumultuous time. And for many of us, we're like, what the hell is happening with the price? I mean, if you do zoom out a bit, I'm having a quick look at a graph here, and over a year, it's 61% up. Over 2 years, 225%. Over 3 years, 463%. And over 4 years, 75%. So while in the short run, we might be feeling somewhat cheated that things were supposed to be a little bit better by now. We've been patient. We've got low time preference. Perhaps there is something around the corner. And based on all the macro musings I've been listening to, it sounds as if 2026 is probably going to be a little bit more prosperous than this year. But as with Bitcoin will do whatever the hell it wants.
On the Trump side of things, the Trump kids potentially making some insider trades. You know, it did look like there was a trade that made about, I think it was like $80 million from what I remember reading. And it was found that an account associated with that was linked back to Trump's son's Treasury Reserve Company. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. It might be American Bitcoin or something like that. But yeah, there's someone that has traced it back to a wallet owned by them. So someone got a tip off that the Trump tariff China announcement was coming, and made a very good play off the back of that. So classic politicians trading insider information and profiting deeply from it. So yeah, unfortunately, we're always going to see a bit of shady business like that happening.
We will come on to some more politicians profiting off the back of inside information. But we're in breaking news. We're actually going to pivot the Australian Bitcoin podcast, rename it to the Australian Gold podcast, because gold has officially become the first asset in history to reach a $30 trillion market cap. We've seen the tweets, or if you live under a rock or you just don't care, basically there's been lines of people outside of gold buyers and sellers, bullion places, etc., like ABC Bullion. But basically, if you haven't noticed, the gold market cap has appreciated by about 50% year over year, climbing from about 19 trillion as of last year, October 2024, to 28.696 trillion, which is pretty massive. Like, we're talking, back of the napkin maths here. It's like $9 trillion worth of capital has flowed into this market, which is like bananas, absolutely bananas. And so what we might do, even though there's not a lot else you can do with gold, and we don't know a lot about it, but we could potentially, just to get the numbers up on the pod, pivot to rebranding it as the Australian Gold podcast, because there seems to be an infinite more amount of interest in gold than there is in Bitcoin, which is I don't know what to say about that. Gentlemen, Mike, give me your answer.
Well, it's still got gold has always just been this life raft, this flight to safety, and with all the crazy stuff happening geopolitically and Trump causing havoc, gold still has that pedigree of that flight to safety. And so people that just still haven't discovered Bitcoin, and, remembering that we're still incredibly early in terms of uptake, in terms of people actually understanding, let alone holding Bitcoin, gold is still that life raft in times of chaos and uncertainty. So we're seeing that play out before our eyes right now with the run up on the gold price and the, breaking that 30 trillion market cap high watermark. That being said, though, there was the largest intraday flash crash in gold that's just happened over the last couple of days. So it has sort of fallen off a peak. Who knows if it will recover and keep going, but it has come down a little bit since then. So, there is talk of, it's when whales are selling their gold and because everyone's lining up, this is actually the time to sell. So, yeah, but overall, it still does have that worm in people's brain of being that flight to safety, and people are fearful right now. They're scared. They don't know what to do.
So if Bitcoin had the same kind of boost, that same surge, I think it was like $9 trillion boost, basically we'd be looking at about 550,000 per Bitcoin. That's USD too. So that would be a tasty little figure if people actually realize that we are in the 21st century. It is 2025, and we can't send gold over long distances without enormous amounts of security, but we can send Bitcoin over the internet with a couple of buttons being pushed, which is cool. But yeah, so I mean, a boy can dream, right? If we got that 718% surge, which is about what it would equate to, if we saw the same amount of capital flow into Bitcoin's market cap over the last year, we might not
Dale,
even be worried about October.
Yeah. Dale, what are your personal thoughts on gold? Because obviously you've been thinking about, obviously your focus is more on real estate and trying to get rid of the brain worm in the Australian, the Australian investor mindset of focusing on real estate. Have you had much thoughts about gold? My personal thing is like, it's nice, but end of the day, it's kind of annoying and difficult to use, just like real estate. You've got this physical thing that's just so difficult to actually make a trade with. You have to lug it down to a shop and they have to make sure that it's legitimate, and then hopefully they'll accept it and fork over some fiat currency or something in exchange for this hunk of metal. It just seems cumbersome to me. But what's your thoughts on gold overall as a store of value?
Yeah, for me personally, I think that there's no circumstance under which I would hold gold over Bitcoin for the reasons you've described. The fact that it's physical in nature means that it's got these inherent flaws and challenges. I think what's important to remember when it comes to what's happening in the current gold market, which is just absolutely kind of outperformed Bitcoin in many respects. I mean, if you think back to 2021, Bitcoin was sitting at circa $1 trillion, gold was at about 10 or 11 trillion. Gold's now increased its market cap by 3 times and Bitcoin only twice. And so the ratio between gold and Bitcoin has gone from kind of 1 to 10 and now to 1 to 15, if you like. So if Bitcoin's 2 trillion, gold's 30 trillion. So gold is this juggernaut, this well-established store of value, and it's not retail investors that are moving the needle here. It's actually central banks, and central banks have been, particularly in the BRICS bloc, China, Russia, and many places around the world, have started abandoning US treasuries as the neutral reserve asset because it's been weaponized and politicized, and they've been stacking gold. And so it's not surprising to see the market move to the tune of trillions of dollars and something like Bitcoin not, because Bitcoin is still incredibly early. And so while a little frustrating in the short term, I think over a long enough time horizon, I think enough sovereigns are going to be jumping on board. I saw recently that Luxembourg were going to stick a couple points of Bitcoin into their sovereign wealth fund. At the end of the day, once people figure out that gold is great, but it has inherent flaws and it's fundamentally physical in nature, which Bitcoin doesn't have, and it's more scarce and it's more verifiable, and I can send it anywhere around the world for a couple dollars. I think at the end of the day, that's where the puck's going. But in the interim, it can be painful being a Bitcoiner watching gold run. And I'm happy for gold, folks. I mean, honestly, like for the longest of times, it underperformed, and despite all the monetary debasement, and I saw recently now that it's actually outperformed the S&P over 20 years. But during that 20-year period, I think you had about 11 or 12 years where it underperformed. And so, think about what that does to an investor mindset with your position getting annihilated by the S&P just by owning an index. But they've finally been rewarded for having a long-term view. So good on them, but we're still going to win.
That is
Agreed.
very, very magnanimous of you, Dale. I appreciate that. That's more than you'll get out of me, gold bugs. Well, speaking of like putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, the US Treasury actually have acquired more Bitcoin in a budget neutral manner. The US Treasury seizes 127,000 odd Bitcoin worth around $14 billion from a Chinese, and we've covered this before in the past, Mike, I think. I still don't know what it is. Pig butchering scam, bringing its total Bitcoin holdings to 324,780 Bitcoin, which is tantamount to the largest confiscation in history. Can you unpack that for us, please, Mike?
Yeah, so for anyone not aware, pig butchering is a form of scamming where usually wealthy Western, usually elderly, are targeted through different kinds of scams, usually romance scams, where a nice, usually young, petite Asian girl might reach out to you through mistake or through some certain channel, usually Facebook, and then they'll claim that they didn't mean to call you, or they called a wrong number, or they're messaging the wrong person, but then they strike up a conversation and then they just build a relationship over time. And these scams can go for 3, 6, 9, 12 months at a time. And basically they're buttering someone up, they're fattening the pig. And then eventually they say, oh, I need help. Can you send me some Bitcoin, or send me something? I need help with a surgery or blah, blah, blah. And that's when the butchering of the pig comes in, and they get some Bitcoin out of them, or some other crypto, or even could even be a cash transfer. And basically scam this person, then cut off contact. And so they've busted a ring and seized a bunch of Bitcoin from one of these pig butchering scams operating out of Cambodia. And I have looked into these. It's pretty grim. Basically, there's this kind of area around Cambodia, sort of border of China and Cambodia, and sort of in that region, where apparently there are these compounds that are run by Chinese mafia and other sort of crime groups, where they literally kidnap people. A lot of Chinese people that come down to Thailand and these other countries for work actually end up getting kidnapped by these criminal gangs, and then they basically get put in these prison camps and then forced to scam Westerners and other foreigners for cryptocurrency and different assets. And so it's a really horrible thing, because you want to hate these scammers, but more often than not, they're actually like prisoners basically of these criminal gangs, and they're forced into doing these scams. And so we've seen some Bitcoin get seized by them, and so supposedly the criminal mastermind is this guy called Chen Zi. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's also called Vincent. He's still at large. He hasn't been captured. They've seized this Bitcoin, but they haven't captured the guy. And my whole position on this sort of thing is, sure, you can seize a bunch of Bitcoin every now and then, or a bunch of crypto assets, but you're not stopping the actual operation. You're not stopping these criminal gangs from still having people in incarceration and forcing them into doing these scams. Why aren't we holding these countries to account? Why aren't we sanctioning China or Thailand or Cambodia, all these countries, and say, look, you need to deal with this problem. We know this is happening. There are literally people on YouTube that are going to the outskirts of these compounds and filming and saying, like, this is what's happening. And yet not a peep from governments about actually acting on these scams that are targeting, Australians and Americans and other innocent citizens out of their money. So it's a real bad situation, and nothing is really being done about it. They pat themselves on the back. They've seized this Bitcoin, but the operations are going to continue. People are going to keep getting scammed. So I went on a bit of a rant there, but it's I don't think it's something to be necessarily celebrating that they've seized this Bitcoin, because they're not dealing with the underlying problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's gosh, you could write an entire many such cases of not attacking the root and getting to the root cause of the issue. That seems to be par for the course for nowadays. I mean, I can remember an older lady that I know was she was like getting comms or an email or something like that, and then all of a sudden 10 grand landed in her account. She's like, "Oh, what's this?" And then there was a follow-up email saying, "Just got to deposit the 8,000 of that to this account here, and you can keep the 2." And she was like, "Oh, shit."
Yep.
And then she tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "Can you help me with this?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, right. That's not normal. We need to contact the police," I'd say. So that may have been a pig butchering scam. I have no idea, but it was. I don't think there was any young Asian.
That one was
involved.
that one was slightly different. That's just a standard money mule. So it's part of money laundering where a criminal institution needs to move funds from one place to another, but they want to break the chain of surveillance, and so they'll use a money mule, which can be through this like incidental. Oh, here's 10 grand. You can keep 8 of it. Keep 2 of it if you send on this 8 grand, and sort of break that chain of surveillance. So yeah, that's a money mule scam. It's a little bit different, but there's a lot of overlap and a lot of crossover with all these different operations. But you can bet your ass that they're all coming from similar criminal elements and sort of these underworld groups. They're all operating the same stuff.
Very good. Well, more work to be done, as is the saying. Some news out today. Australian house prices are rising at their fastest rate in 4 years. Can you believe it? Thanks in large part to the government's 5% first home buyer initiative. Brisbane overtaking Canberra as the second most expensive housing market after Sydney, with median prices rising almost $40,000. So, we're winning here, guys. We, this Irish tiger or this Aussie tiger, what's the equivalent of an Irish tiger? I don't know. That's a niche reference, but basically I'm pretty sure that's what they called the housing crisis in Ireland when it crashed after 2008. But anyway, Australian house prices are rising at the fastest rate. This is amazing. Basically, the only way is up for my property. Talk to me. Unpack this for me, Dale, because you've been diving deep into this, and we'll come to the book that you've written. You've spent a lot of time on unpacking all this. But are you happy that my property is pumping 40 grand? You're gonna have to work that much harder to save that deposit.
I always like it when they tell people, listen, prices are this or that, and Australians are incredibly wealthy relative to global standards. And you kind of go, well, how's that comprised? And then you realize that almost 85% of Aussie wealth is tied up in their primary residence. You're like, okay, I see why this is a vested political interest and that it can only go up. And even the slightest pullback is going to just trigger this cascade of whinging. So we need to figure out which levers we can pull at every single opportunity to make sure that this boy does not tank. And so, yeah, I'm in Brisbane. I'm a property owner. I feel incredibly wealthy and smart for taking out as much leverage as I can and buying a home, and it's done well. But I think it doesn't solve the problem. Obviously, the problem long term is that it's just unaffordable. And nothing ever goes up in a straight line. And for the longest of times, I thought that Aussie prices would correct, particularly post-21. I thought there was just like post-COVID, that boost was just sort of unsustainable to my mind, particularly some of the regional areas that I was looking at. And I've been in real estate for the longest of time, and it didn't make sense. Everything about real estate is cyclical in nature. However, I don't know. I don't want to say this time is different, but I feel like there's a regime shift where it's like a protected asset class and it cannot be touched, and you're not allowed to let this thing go backwards. I mean, little old Adelaide has got a median house price of over $1 million, and there is not a real economy there in the sense of the private sector. It's mostly government jobs.
Yeah, second lowest GDP per capita in the country. So effectively the second poorest state in the country has one of the highest median house prices in its capital city.
Doesn't stack up, Mike. So there will be something will stop this train. It's just about at what point do you hop off? Because in the interim, you watch everyone else get wealthy in fiat terms. And yeah, so I tend to think in the short to medium term, this will continue and it will ramp up.
There's only one thing that will stop the train, and that's stopping mass immigration. I maintain that, yes, there are some edge cases, negative gearing and foreign investment, all this sort of thing that's happening that does keep it going. But ultimately it is that mass immigration number, which is going higher and higher and higher. We're on track to have the highest immigration numbers in history this year. We're already at that point right now. We're not even finished out the year. As long as that demand is there, demand for mortgages will always be there. And that's just going to keep squeezing that supply. No matter how many houses we build, if we got plenty of people coming in, the demand will be there. And the 5% deposit scheme that the government just wrote out only made things worse. It's exactly what every single economist was saying. It's just going to make it worse. House prices are just going to go even higher. It's just going to keep going. And you're right. It's this golden pig that can't be touched. No government will be allowed to touch it because it will unravel our economy if it was messed with. So,
do you know what, Mike? Can I push back on one part of what you said there? Sorry to interrupt, mate. Is basically and I agree in some ways and I disagree in others. So I agree that immigration is certainly a big factor. But the challenge you've got with real estate is it's very much a localized phenomenon in the sense that what's happening in my suburb is very different to what's happening in the southern suburbs of Brisbane or in Brisbane West, like Ipswich, and that's just Brisbane. And so when people talk about the property market, it doesn't exist because there isn't an average home. They're all unique. They're on the original non-fungible tokens, if you like. And so let's talk about immigration where I live. In my neighborhood, it's not very diverse. It's another way of saying it's largely white. Okay, we don't deal with immigrants to that extent. They are more in the outlying suburb, which are more affordable. So I understand that those people are being competed with. I'm not competing with any immigrants, from what I can tell, because there are none that are coming to my neck of the woods. On top of that, when I was prior to becoming a citizen, it was very difficult to get decent rates at the bank. And there were not many banks that would be keen to touch me as someone who wasn't a citizen or didn't have permanent residence. So to the extent that a lot of the people are here and not on permanent residence visas, if they're on temporary visas, their ability to acquire property is severely compromised. That said, I think the policy of just mass importation from people who have zero intention to actually integrate ultimately is a terrible policy decision. I'm just not convinced that it's impacting all property markets equally. Certainly, I think at the lower socioeconomic rungs of society, I think now those folks in Australia are competing with the newly arrived immigrants. And that is, of course, pushing up prices and creating a lot of discontent. But as a somewhat privileged pig sitting where I am, I don't tend to see it.
Look, from my perspective, it's always good to be number one at things. So, as far as I'm concerned, let's keep going. Let's pump this Ponzi as high as we can go. I want to beat Canada. I see that they're having a downturn in some of their property prices, and same with our cousins over in New Zealand. So yeah, screw them. Let's keep going. I want to reach number one. I don't even own a property.
Australia number one.
I just want to win. Yeah. So with that, though, young Australians are turning to cryptocurrency apparently to save house deposits, which we've been advocating for certainly here at Hard Block, and not cryptos but Bitcoin. Because it is genuinely the only way to actually save for a house. And if you have a low enough time preference, it's entirely possible that you could buy that house outright. Although, $40,000 price increase, and we're still at prices not seen, roundabout. So it's almost been a year at just over $100,000, $100K USD for Bitcoin. But so we've got some work to do. But basically, You've got here, Mike, a recent finder.com.au analysis of PropTrack and ABS loan data found Aussies need to earn roughly $200,000 a year to be able to afford a typical house in our cap cities without going into mortgage stress. And this is one of the catalysts at play for why they're pivoting to something like Bitcoin or potentially cryptocurrency trading to try and get there. It's Cobra effect.
Yep. Yeah. So it's obviously the Aussie dream was to always, eventually get your house, hopefully have a mortgage you can deal with. But the reality of the market is that even if you do manage to find that house and get a mortgage, a lot of people are just immediately in mortgage stress just because the amount that you have to borrow is so high. So there are a lot of people that just at the bottom that just can't even get onto the ladder. And so they're looking at what options there are to either get a larger deposit to start with, or even just abandon that dream of owning a property at all. And what do you get instead? Well, the hot new thing for Gen Z is crypto. And so rather than working your way onto that property ladder, people are just starting to turn to other stores of wealth, which is Bitcoin, obviously. Some are trying to see crypto as this way of, get rich, still this sort of like get rich quick, get your returns, make your bags, and then use that to make a deposit. And that's what this sort of clickbaity style article that I picked out of news.com.au was talking about. It showed a use case of a tradie who bought some shit coins, got really lucky, and then managed to use that to buy a house to afford the very expensive down payment on getting onto that property ladder. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is for every successful use case, you hear of some lucky tradie who invests in some shitcoin and then gets lucky with a 10x or higher. There's probably 1,000 that are getting wrecked. They're getting wiped out because they see articles like this and they're like, oh, now I'm going to do that because that's going to get me on the property ladder. And then they buy some shit coins and then something like the flash crash happens, like what happened 2 weeks ago, and they just get completely wrecked and wiped out. So you don't want to be encouraging people to do that. But at the same time, you do want to be encouraging them towards having savings in something that is resistant to inflation, resistant to debasement, which is Bitcoin, which is gold, and this sorts of things. So it is a good sort of stopgap measure while you can't get that safe haven of, your family home. It is an alternative that's out there. I guess, Dale, it would be good to get your opinion on, and maybe we'll get into this a bit later as well when we talk about your the book you've been writing about this, which is, if you can't even get your first rung on the ladder, obviously you poo-poo the idea of property investing, but you still need at least one place to live. You don't want to be a renter for your entire life. So, there is this idea that you can stack a bit of Bitcoin, a bit of crypto or whatever, but then are you open to the idea of still swapping that over for a mortgage at some point and getting that family home under your belt or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a few things more grounding than having a property that you own and you live in. There are a few things more frustrating than having to deal with regular inspections, agents, don't hang this, we're doing that. The landlord can increase rates significantly. It's just a complete pain in the ass. Obviously, there's advantages to renting. You don't have to worry about maintenance, which is the biggest ball ache of actually owning your own property. But in terms of people wanting to own their own properties, I get it. It makes all the sense in the world. And we have a culture in Australia of home ownership. It's not like parts of Europe where 70% of people just rent and they're cool with that. They don't care. And to your point there, Mike, I mean, the only viable way of getting on the property ladder without actual financial assistance from the bank of mum and dad is to save in Bitcoin. I'm not aware of anything else that can outperform it. I wouldn't even recommend saving in something like gold, even though it can't be debased, because what we've seen with gold is for significant periods of time, it just does absolutely nothing. And you might have been better off just storing your wealth in fiat, frankly. Bitcoin has consistently delivered, if we look at the last, say, 5 years, I think it's around 60% compound annual growth rate. So even if you cut that in half and you can withstand the volatility, I think the biggest challenge is you're a young person. Have you put in the time and effort to understand Bitcoin? because if you haven't, it just feels like I'm investing in, pick a crypto. I don't know what the other cryptos are, Atomic or whatever, Sui. And it just
Fartcoin.
feels a better,
It's
a better
my
version.
favorite.
Which is that, Mike?
Fartcoin.
Oh, Fartcoin, I know, making waves. So exactly, and so it's like, no, this is the best brand. No, but you don't get it. I mean, that's just, yes, it's the best brand, but there's no competitors. There's no need for another money. So if you haven't figured that piece out, you're not going to save in it and consistently, because you won't look at dips as opportunities to acquire more Bitcoin. But I've got a savings calculator on my website, and there's plenty available online where you can just plug in what you're capable of saving each month and just plug in some very conservative estimates in terms of what Bitcoin will do over the next, say, 5 years. And if your goal is to buy a home in 5 years, your ability to save in Bitcoin, you're going to outpace the growth in property markets, and no doubt in 5 years. You just need to have the kahunas and the knowledge and conviction to withstand the volatility. And therein lies the rub. I don't think enough people have done the work, which again speaks to the fact that we're very early.
You're looking for a hassle-free way to buy Bitcoin in Australia? Hardblock makes it easy. As Australia's longest-running Bitcoin-only exchange, their mission is to help Australians simply and easily buy Bitcoin and take it into self-custody. There are no deposit or trading fees, just a clear 2.4% spread. That covers operating costs, so you always know exactly what you're paying. Withdrawals are just $1.18 or as low as 400 sats with AutoSend. There are no hidden charges, no surprises, just a fast, reliable and easy way to stack sats with total transparency. Get started today at hardblock.com.au. Bitcoin made easy for Aussies.
Agreed.
I do want to actually pivot to your book actually now, Dale, because we're talking about it, right? We might as well. There is a couple of topics I want to pick up at the back end of the episode. In particular, Square launching their Bitcoin payments, and they did it at a coffee shop, like as if that's an original thing. And also the Australian Bitcoin Club, Santo had a banging tweet recently, which we retweeted on our Hardblock feed. But we'll come back to that. Let's stick with real estate, and let's stick with Dale's expertise here, because he has just released a book. You can get it on Amazon. It's called No Tenants, No Troubles, The Case for Digital Gold Over Real Estate. It's a sexy little cover you've got going on there, Dale. Give us the TLDR so far.
The TLDR, and I designed that cover, so I'm going to take all the credit in the world for that. So the TLDR is very simple. When it comes to Bitcoin versus investment properties, very distinct from owner-occupier properties that you want to actually live in, that you get utility from. I think that it's not even a close comparison, because the TLDR is quite simply that I would rather trust mathematics and code than I would people. With property is fundamentally a human endeavor, in the sense that, on the one hand, if you are a property investor, you're reliant on tenants. Tenants are unpredictable. People are unpredictable. Even if you've got a great tenant and they pay on time all the time, which hardly ever happens, there's all sorts of other things that can happen in their own life. Divorce. This person lost their job. They suddenly can't pay. You still need to pay the mortgage. Maybe the tenant's a bit of a reprobate. He has parties. He damages stuff. He drops stuff on your expensive flooring. You constantly have to manage the individuals and keep them happy. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the bureaucrats, the folks who are making the rules, the policymakers, and the ever increasing industry around that of safety and compliance and regulatory burden. And you can't do what you want with your property. It's not yours. You're a human meat puppet living on government land with their permission, because you can't build as you want. You can't do what you want. You just have to get everyone's permission to even do the slightest of alterations to your property to remain, quote unquote, compliant. And so these are an ever-setting change of rules, and ultimately it's unpredictable. So I prefer something where there's 21 million. I know what the monetary policy is, and it's code. We can fight about knots and core, but at the end of the day, no one's going to change those parameters, presumably. And so I prefer Bitcoin. It's faster, it's sleeker, it's more sovereign. And investment properties, the TLDR is the juice is not worth the squeeze.
So you've got experience in the real estate industry as well. Are you giving this to some colleagues, former colleagues, whatever, to try and effectively, this is like a whole other route of orange pilling people. Have you had a much response from the real estate industry and others in general?
As of yet, DJ, I must be one of the worst self-promoters to walk the face of the earth. I could probably learn some from some of the crypto grifters.
No,
because
that's not true. That's me. I'm taking that mantle.
Okay, you can take the mantle. You and I can compete for that maybe in the future. But it's been a rather unceremonious launch in the sense that I happened to launch at a time when I'm traveling and I've decided to take a break from social media. So I have not really done a tremendous amount of work. That said, I've ordered a bunch of author copies and I will be sending those to people that I used to work with and for, because I always spoke about it. I was always the Bitcoin guy. My thinking here is that I suppose when I looked at why do I want to write a book, I wanted to do something that I think would have some sort of longer lasting imprint. So much of what I do is I feel like very ephemeral and transient, and no one cares about my tweets from last week, and plus they're not even that useful. So the thought was, what happens if I wrote something that I've got some actual expertise and experience in, where I think it will stand the test of time. I think this hopefully could be the book that people could send to people who are real estate maxis, people who want to buy investment properties and going look, just pause that for a moment. Let's imagine there's another paradigm. If you open up your mind just momentarily and think that maybe investment properties aren't the best and there's something else, here is an alternative. And I've tried to make it as it's pretty idiot proof, written in really plain language. It's an hour and a half of read. It's quick in that sense. So it's really not like Lynn Alden's Broken Money, which is a tall order for anyone to jump down. So I've tried to keep it accessible, and I think in the long arc of time, if I can influence a couple hundred people along the way to not go that route, I would feel like my work is done. But I make no qualms about the fact that I think we are still so incredibly early. We are such a minority of Bitcoiners, particularly in Australia. And it's going to take a lot more time before I think the penny drops. Unfortunately, so many people are just high time preference, and all they could do is they think about what is the next, fart coin or shard coin or whatever. How can I quickly double my money? And all they need to do is tradie, do this or that, or some mayor who gambled and won some funds. I don't know. It's just nobody wants to do the long, hard, boring work of saving over time.
Well,
the main
we
argument
haven't
for
really
me
been...
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
DJ.
Mike.
The main argument that sort of works on me when I'm weighing up Bitcoin versus real estate is just the faffing about when you take into context the time component of finding properties and then managing them, managing tenants, and just when you quantify that time component, the metric becomes way clearer that Bitcoin is the better choice because you just buy it and forget about it and get on with your life. Whereas a real estate investment is just this constant burden hanging over you. So that argument alone is what really moves the needle in my head. So do you hammer that point home in your book about that sort of time component?
Yeah, 100%, man. I think it is probably the most understated or underestimated aspect of investment properties is the emotional time and energy that it takes. And I think that people would be wise to think about that. Yeah. And literally there's stuff happening in my direct sphere of influence that I can relate to on that particular point. My folks bought a spot in Portugal, that golden visa program about 9 years ago now, I think it is. No, something in that vicinity. And finally the tenant's moving out. They've had one single tenant for the entire duration, but she did all sorts of crazy shit, like dug a hole in the wall to put a big screen TV and did all the stuff, like never asking for permission. And they've now got to come in, and now they're sitting in the middle of the bush in Africa with sketchy internet, and they're trying to organize air conditioning quotes. And then guess what? The Homeowners Association only meets once a quarter, and we don't know if they're going to meet in January, February, or March of next year. And there's a new tenant now who says, I want air conditioning as a condition. So my dad goes, well, that's reasonable. It gets hot there. So we now have to deal with this. How do we deal with this little situation? No, now we need a portable air conditioner that we have to rent to solve the problem. Like, think how much time that is. I think I saw my dad spend almost a full day of his life dealing with this property, and like, it's done really well. It was bought pre-COVID and all that jazz. But it's like, for me, the best thing about Bitcoin, and maybe it's the worst thing, is because I have, like, you set and forget. You set up your multi-sig with your generational wealth, and then you're off to the races. Now, if you're someone like, I guess, us, we are constantly looking to improve things and stress test them and that sort of thing. So, but fundamentally, like, it's kind of idiot-proof. You set it and forget it, and your operating costs are really low. You can leave it in a vault for a couple $100 a year. I mean, honestly, like, you don't have to sit and talk to your Bitcoin every day and get on the phone and speak to a manager of your Bitcoin and like, oh God, what's happening? Has someone damaged it? No, it's all yours. And you can do whatever you want with it. So I think the time and effort is something that most people, don't think about. And the thing that drives me most crazy is these headlines like, I'm 25 and I've got 32 investment properties. And I'm like, fuck this guy, because you basically are just a degenerate who has just you've shorted fiat and you've just borrowed against each property. And all you're doing is you're riding an upwave, and you're going to get absolutely slaughtered when there's even the mildest of corrections. And so it wouldn't upset me to see things kind of cool off a bit, like Canada and New Zealand, to stop seeing these bullshit stories. But, yeah, people need to stop mucking around with investment properties and realize actually there are much better ways to actually store your wealth. But I get it, and I don't want to be too harsh towards them, because show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome. If literally if the government has created an environment that is very conducive to up only, sometimes that's the rational thing to do, or most often. So I get it, but yeah, from an investment property perspective, I've seen the good, bad, the ugly, and the people that are doing well are professionals, and typically they're people who are also handy. If you're not handy, then you have to outsource the maintenance, and that's where all your margins get smashed.
Can I ask you, sort of looking forward, just a bit of speculation? I'm wondering about if there's any scenarios where, if this trend continues, and it looks like it is, if there's no like rollback of negative gearing, there's no rollback of immigration numbers, there's no rollback of anything that's just causing this to get squeezed. Do we reach a point where things start to break down in terms of even just like respect for property rights, and we start to see more people squatting or just flagrantly ignoring property rights, and these people that walk around with a portfolio of 40 or 50 properties, but then the people at the bottom that just have no choice, they just start squatting and they start ignoring the rule of law. I don't know if you can see that happening in parts of Africa, South Africa, while you're there, but that's kind of where my mind goes. Like, how far can this go? How extreme can it get before people start literally just ignoring the rule of law because they just can't afford a place to live?
Here's what I've learned about Australia is that when it comes to the enforcement of laws, it's highly selective, and they've showed themselves to be very good at enforcing laws when they need to or want to, aka COVID. When there are things happening on my back door where there's a guy from Bangladesh selling cigarettes for $10 that fell off the back of a truck as opposed to $40, and he's clearly not paying the taxes, and it's in front of everyone's bloody eyes, and yet nothing happens, like nothing. But I get smashed for a $230 fine because I was 1 kilometer over the speed limit. The way the enforcement works is just anyone's guess. Like, I can't predict where it'll be. I think that I think Australia will enforce property rights, and I think they will apply actual force if needs be, because it strikes me as being foundational to the social contract here. What could happen, though, to your point, Mike, is basically things run up, they continue to get more and more steamy. It goes from being a slim possibility to a complete and utter mathematical impossibility for the average person to be able to buy a home, the median home, let's call it whatever the hell that means. Because instead of it being 3 or 5 times the annual income, which it was in the sort of 90s, to now, say, 10, 11, 12, maybe it gets up to like 15 or 18, you just start seeing more and more divide. And I think then what you start seeing is some of the US style politics. And I studied politics, I'm interested in it, but I don't really pay attention to it. But ultimately, I think what you see is more populism on the left and the right. So the socialists are like, we need more free stuff. It's not fair. It's not fair. And then the right-wing nationalists will be like, we need to curb all these people coming and they're taking our jobs. They took our jobs. They took our hopes. And so it's like, you just see them like having fights in the streets and everyone's bitching and moaning and going, you're the problem. You're the problem. And actually, it's just the government who's just created this absolute hot mess through terrible policy. But I don't think it'll get there yet. Unfortunately, I think that things will get worse. I feel like it will get worse before it gets better. And I tell people this all the time, and this is just my sort of, because I've traveled around and I've lived in Africa. I think Australia's heading down the same path as many Western countries. I just think it's the best of the lot in the sense that we're going to be slower. So I can see very clearly 5 years, things still working and functioning well in Australia. I've said Jan 2030, I'm going to revisit my position and see where things are at, because I don't necessarily like the trajectory of some stuff, but generally, if you zoom out, I can tell you what, the grass is not greener. There's many, many parts of the world that are faring a lot worse, even though Aussies might find that hard to believe, because Albo is just the biggest retard and the most deplorable individual. Sorry to get political.
But Albo, he's patting himself on the back from his latest meeting with Trump. He's celebrating that as a big win, when really he's just being a lapdog to US interests.
My God, yeah, what a bait male!
You, Mike, that sent me that video of Trump and his interaction with Mr. Kevin 07, and he just completely blasted him, like just it was just full roast. It was absolutely brutal.
It's pretty brutal.
Face, I don't like you.
Yeah, for anyone that hasn't seen it, it's worth looking it up. It's our previous PM, Kevin 07. He's currently the Australian ambassador to the US. And he was there in the White House meeting with Albo and everything, and Trump gave him a bit of a talking down, and he just sat there and took it. And it almost seems like Albo was just, you would think that if we had a strong leader, he would stick up for his ambassador. I get that Trump's an imposing figure, and you've got to keep your ego in check and that sort of thing. But at the same time, you can't let stuff like that slide. Like, I feel like if we had a proper strong leader, he would have stood up for old mate Rudd in that moment. But of course, we just got wet noodle Albo, and good.
The Schadenfreude is the only thing that's getting me through any of this. To be perfectly honest, I say let them quabble. But just before we pivot off to a couple of things and start rounding out the show, I just want to give a shout out to No Tenants, No Troubles. You can, there's a link to, we'll put that in the show notes, but you can go to dalewarburton.com and then find the link is my book on the top there. And you got a bunch of calculators too, which are really super helpful. In fact, if you ever mention the word like how much Bitcoin do I need to retire, particularly on a YouTube thumbnail, you probably get a significant boost in your viewership. But you've got a Bitcoin retirement calculator on there, which is incredibly useful. I've shown that to my wife, and that's kind of assuaged some of her fears around SMSF and things like this, which is great.
Yeah, I actually like created all these things because I was like, I want to figure out like, is there a way that I can have exceptional experiences without without necessarily eroding my entire stack? So I want to be able to take advantage of the benefits of saving in Bitcoin, of buying $50 a week when I was poor in 2022, but it was still down, etc. And yeah, I think the that was the dream calculator that I created. Basically, you can shape a little bit of your Bitcoin each year and preserve a percentage and still live a great life, go on holidays, you know, because life's for living, man. The more I also think about that Bitcoin retirement calculator, the more I also think of I can't wait for the products that are going to pop up around being able to borrow against your Bitcoin in a responsible way, in a multi-sig, and something that's like with a rate a little bit more a bit more reasonable, and also the time horizon is not 1 year or 2 years, but it's like 4 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years. Much like a mortgage, that's when things get really interesting for me, because then you don't even have to worry about selling your Bitcoin. You don't have to worry about paying CGT if it's structured properly, and that's win-win-win.
Now let's wrap up the show. We'll bring this into land a little bit, but just before we do, Santo from BTC Club had an absolute rager of a tweet. He every now and again, like he just finds his data and he has a really great way of framing it. Basically, Australia has vast energy reserves, like ranging from uranium, coal, gas, etc. And yet we pay one of the highest domestic prices due to exports and regulation. So number one, again, that's the theme of the show. I might even change the title of the episode, but this is super interesting. I just find that so we've got these vast reserves. We're paying the highest amount, and the thing that reveals it all is Bitcoin as the real energy barometer. So Bitcoin mining provides a neutral global benchmark of energy efficiency and affordability. And basically in Australia, it currently costs up to 70% more to mine a single Bitcoin than Bitcoin's market price. That's nuts. Honestly, the sooner that those people stop being in a room kowtowing to people like Trump or lip quivering because he poked fun at them, and actually put their time and energy and their mind to some actual useful things rather than pumping the property price and all the rest of it. I mean, we could actually legitimately be number one at something that's useful for the citizens of this country, no matter where you're from. Did you see that tweet, boys? Did you have any thoughts off the back of that?
Yeah, so I've always maintained that Australia should be leaning into, especially the nuclear energy cycle. We could own that full life cycle of digging it up, refining it, building the technology that utilizes it, taking advantage of it.
That's because you're a South African. That's because you're from South Australia, bro. And I heard.
That's right.
Heard.
It's mostly in South
Stop
Australia.
becoming the second poorest.
That's it. South Australia could become the powerhouse state if it just owned it and fully got behind nuclear. Could be, but we just decide to shoot ourselves in the foot instead. And we won't even think we were going to build a nuclear waste storage facility that ended up getting knocked back because it was on native land, and we can't because there's the whatever Aboriginal thing happening there, so we can't build a facility. But yeah, we should own that full life cycle. We should and could own that full life cycle. Yes, it's a 10-year project, maybe a 20-year project, even just to start to see some dividends. But that's how you build nations. That's how you build real intergenerational wealth for your country and for your citizens. But we're stuck in this 4-year political shit fight. That means that we can't think in these long-term scales. And so we just keep playing in the dust and eating shit. So yeah, it's something we should do. And then same thing with all of our hydrocarbon reserves, natural gas and all this sort of thing. We're not tapping into it ourselves because we're scared of emissions. We're scared of the boiling the oceans away. So we just ship it overseas, sell it to China, sell it to Japan, who then on-sells it and reaps all the profits. It's just utter absurdity and insanity. And I think I saw a tweet that talked about China outputs so Australia's full year of emissions, China emits that in 13 days. So in 13 days, China has output more emissions, pollution, CO2, whatever you're looking at, than Australia does in 13 days, in 2 weeks. And yet we are kneecapping
more
ourselves,
subsidies.
trying to bend over backwards and do all this net zero garbage. It's
We need more
ridiculous, and we just need to
subsidies, more
start calling it out.
rebates.
Yeah,
Come on, Mike.
it's
More
insane.
subsidies.
More subsidies.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I mean, it's and like, you know what? I feel like I'm pretty objective because I feel like a citizen of the world. I've lived in South Africa, I've lived in Australia, and like I look at Australia and I go, you guys are just scoring such like own goal after own goal after own goal. It's like I can't believe that you vote in such a bunch of incompetent traitors who are just self-interested and have no interest in the future prosperity of the nation. Because like, how is it that energy prices in Australia, when converted in rands, are the same? Like, how is that possible? Like, in South Africa, we've had essentially a criminal enterprise running government for 30 years who have done next to zero maintenance of all the infrastructure they inherited, which was world class, and they've done nothing. And there's rolling blackouts. How is that? How are we on the same playing field as South Africa? And it's just horrific policy. Let's make Australia green and wipe out millions of hectares of pristine bushland in Queensland and just put some solar panels there. You know who's not putting solar panels? China, because they know coal's where it's at, and that's what's actually reliable, and it's the formation of the industrial base, and we've exported all of our jobs there. But at least we can buy $3 Kmart t-shirts and we can feel good about ourselves. So yeah, at the end of the day, it frustrates me to no end. Clearly, as Mike said, nuclear is the way forward, but the incentives, as always, are driving the outcomes. And I'm only thinking in 4 years. So why am I going to put my neck out and my future for something that, is going to change? In 4 years, I'm going to be out of here, man. And I get to sit on a fat government pension with my 7 investment properties and talk about how I changed the world.
It's really grim all the way down. If you look at China, just a slight correction there. So China is building solar panels as well as burning coal and burning oil and gas. They are also building solar panels, but this is where it gets really horrific when you look at the emissions trading scheme and carbon credits. So you've got Western companies, you've got Australian companies that are buying carbon credits, and a lot of those carbon credits actually go to Chinese solar farm manufacturers. So they're actually building solar plants in China to generate clean and green energy in China, but they're paid for by Australian companies and American companies and European companies that are buying carbon credits and essentially subsidizing and funding solar farms in China. And China's going, great, we got these stupid Australian companies giving us free money to build solar plants. We'll take that energy that we're going to generate from the solar plant, and we're also going to burn the coal anyway. And it's just cheaper energy for China as a whole. So they are utterly just laughing at us. And we are just, like you said, we're just kicking own goals. We're shackling ourselves to ideology. We're destroying our future through this sort of stuff. And people just need to start calling it out for how utterly ridiculous it is. We need to start harassing politicians for how just obnoxiously stupid they are in their policies.
Yeah, we do. I that's not my jam anymore, Mike. You know that. I love the fact that you've taken up the mantle and we'll be doing that. Well, just a point on China too. They're also building those giant dams, and one of them obviously is the Three Gorges Dam, which actually shifted the Earth off its rotation axis by roughly 0.8 inches or 2 centimeters, which is kind of cool. Just a fun little fact there. Before we bring this into land, I just wanted to point out that Square, in some positive Bitcoin news, because let's be honest, of all the schadenfreude and the griping and the moaning and the whinging, you know what? Actually, Dale, you reminded me. You had coined a phrase this podcast, which I think I'm going to take with me, and I'll credit it where I need to. But cascade of whinging was phenomenal. I'm going to take that. So we can have a cascade of whinging on this pod, because politicians are well and truly fucking up literally everything. And if they would just leave and get out of the way and let us build the things that we need to build in order to create a prosperous future for ourselves and our family, it would be all the better. And Bitcoin, of course, fixes this. But in a recent pilot launch, so Square, one of the ways we can get to onboard more people is to make it super simple for them to receive Bitcoin as payment directly through the register, which is really cool. So Square has obviously turned that feature on. They're piloting it in the US. It was showcased during DC FinTech Week. And basically, it's really cool. You can just basically toggle a switch, and you can actually set the amount. We did mention this, I think, on the pod earlier, but they've actually rolled it out since we last got on the podcast. And there was a video of a local coffee house in Washington, D.C., Compass Coffee, and they became the first Square merchant in the world to accept Bitcoin payments directly through their register. Now, in August of 2025, this year, I don't think it was necessarily through the actual Square terminal. I'm pretty sure it wasn't, but it was certainly on an iPad. And we did the collaboration with Jesse and the guys at Rise Mofo, where they were accepting Bitcoin at their coffee shop. So, we're kind of, in terms of this wave, we're probably a little bit early, but we're certainly directionally correct. And I just want to say a shout out to Jack and the team over there, Miles, as well, that we kind of did it first. Cool initiative, but we did it first. Number one, baby.
Yeah,
it does highlight that, it is useful to have Square and all of their point of sale terminals turning on this functionality, but people need to remember that you don't necessarily need all these fancy tools. Like, you can just download a wallet of Satoshi or whatever wallet and start accepting Bitcoin payments, no matter what you're doing. Like, that is the power of Bitcoin. You don't have to have this fancy infrastructure behind you. You can just make payments. It's peer-to-peer. It works. All this sort of stuff does make it easier. And people won't even, in some cases, know that there's Bitcoin stuff happening on the back end. But yeah, it is a humble reminder that, a cafe can just get the software, get the tools, and start accepting and trading Bitcoin. So it's always humbling to remember that.
absolutely. And I think we should also remember, being Bitcoiners, we tend to overstate how simple things are. If you can just remove these friction points and now it just becomes seamless to be able to accept Bitcoin and you don't have to do anything new, that's a game changer just from a user experience perspective. Because for the actual merchant themselves to have to now go and upskill, even though we think like, download a wallet, here's a QR code, just relax, man, it's easy. There is that friction in their mind. So I'm very bullish on this. And look, I think there's a lot of accountants who are going to have fun trying to calculate how much tax somebody owes for all the Bitcoin they've spent.
That's why we need the tax lobby on our side of all the accountants kicking up a fuss saying, I can't keep track of all this capital gains and all these people buying coffees with Bitcoin. So they start lobbying the government to treat it as cash and no longer have to do CGT calculations on on Bitcoin. That's what we want.
Small ask.
That's what we want. 550,000 Bitcoin, $550,000 Bitcoin, and evisceration of CGT across all assets, but in particular Bitcoin. Gentlemen, a fantastic rip. Dale, thank you so much for joining us, bright and sparky over there in South Africa. We've got the book, No Tenants, No Troubles. We'll put that in the show note. You can get more information at dalewarburton.com. And you can follow Dale as well. I'll put a link in the show notes as well for your Twitter handle, Dale21M. And you're doing some work with the Bitcoin Mentor as well, which you can always, so if you have any questions or you want to sort of get up to speed, obviously you can go to learn.hardblock.com.au. We've got plenty of resources for you to dive into. But if you actually want to talk to someone who knows their onions and can help you get up to speed on the Bitcoin side of things, reach out to Dale, because his work with the Bitcoin Mentor is fantastic. And although I haven't read the book yet, it's certainly something that I think, now that the Christmas trees are starting to go up in the various shopping centers and streets and such, I think, at Christmas time, particularly that stubborn curmudgeon-y uncle that still thinks that his investment properties are the way to go, it might be a good little bet to give him that book for Christmas. Gentlemen, with that in said, Mike, thanks so much. It was awesome to join you. And Dale, cheers, man, for coming on. We'll see you when we see you on the next episode of the Australian Bitcoin Podcast.
Thanks, boys.
Cool.
It's been a
Thanks,
blast.
guys.
Really enjoyed it.